Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the SDG Media Zone. My name is Francine Harrigan. I'm with the United Nations Department of Public Information, and we're streaming live this week from the UN General Assembly. It's my pleasure to introduce the next panel, Youth in the Lead, and Nadira Hero will be leading the next discussion and introducing the speakers. Thank you, Nadira.
Thank you so much. How's everybody doing? Can say great. Isn't it amazing? It's early in the afternoon and we already feel like, oh my gosh, we're overwhelmed, but in the best possible way. So I'm so excited to moderate today's panel, mostly because the two women to my left are phenomenal. And I'll just quickly introduce them. First, the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, Jayatma Wickrama. I've had it.
I go like Beyonce, Adele, Jayatma.
Wikramanayaka.
Yes, you did a good job.
That work. I've been up since 3:30, folks. And you have just been 6 weeks into this position, right? So congratulations, and we're so excited to hear from you. And the Honorable Boholo Kenewendo, who is a specially elected member of the Parliament of Botswana and currently the youngest sitting MP, and also the youngest female MP in the history of the Botswana Parliament, I think. But the sort of fun fact about both these ladies is that they were the first youth delegates from both their countries, from Sri Lanka and from Botswana, in 2012 and in 2009. So kind of goal number 5 in action right here. So just to start, our panel is actually called Youth in the Lead, as you heard. And I'm really struck by the fact that as much as we've talked about how young people need to engage with the agenda in order for it to be achieved, I'm also struck by how when I talk to actual young people, they don't actually feel like they have access to the agenda or they're engaged by it in an active way. They don't necessarily feel empowered or invited into the conversation. And one young man said this morning, and I love this, so I'll share it with you. He said, we're always inside events, but we need to be inside events. So I wonder, and that's somebody who's at the UN, so I can imagine for those folks out in the universe, it's even more the case. So I guess the first question is, are youth actually in the lead? And if they aren't, how do we get them more in that forefront and get them engaged in this agenda so we can actually achieve these goals?
No, absolutely. So when you mean by this agenda, we talk about SDGs, right? So for me personally, not only as the youth envoy, but as a young woman or a young person, there is no two such things as SDGs and the world and SDGs and young people. Half of the world's population is young people. In the global south, in many countries, it is close to 80%. In countries like Somalia, it's like 81%. In India, they have 500 million young people. So there's no two things as SDGs and young people. It's one thing. It's like SDGs and young people, and how we best utilize this absolutely amazing resource we have to make the 2030 dream a reality. And Nadira, when you ask me, are young people actually in the lead? I think they are. And I think they are taking the lead. In my missions, in my work as the youth envoy, I meet hundreds and thousands of young people who are leading community initiatives in their villages, in their regions, in their countries, coming up with disruptive ideas. They're disrupting businesses, they're disrupting the health sector, education, economic sector, the entertainment sector, and they're bringing in new ideas, and they're definitely leading. And the question is, as I always say, can the rest of the world keep up with them? Young people are leading, but can we give them the necessary resources to amplify their action, right? How do we link young people with other young people who are on the same course, who are innovating just like they are, bringing in solutions to the problems affecting their communities? How do we link them with each other? How do we recognize these young people and multiply the effects that they're having on their communities in a global scale? How do we showcase these best practices? I think this is the biggest challenge that we have today.
Boholo?
I agree with what you just said, and it's very true. young people are leading, I usually say it is a great time to be a young person, because you see a lot of governments that are now opening up and trying to include young people. A lot of narrative that the future is now is already being spread. So, you know, if you've already had that kind of energies, this is the right time to really break into those kind of spaces. However, it is also, you know, they say sometimes when you climb higher, it also becomes more challenging. You know, you're breaking barriers, and you find that some of those barriers are, well, not some, they're centuries old, right? And those, it takes such a long time to break those down, and some people are still holding on to them so tightly that then, while at the same time it's a great period to be young, it is also such a challenging time to try to break through and get the impact that you deserve and that you're trying to encourage the world over.
Are there examples that you can share, or maybe a favorite example of some place where someone has broken through, or a particular group has broken through? What are some practical examples of places where that's worked? Yeah. Breaking those protocols or those barriers, which are real, as you say.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, being a first youth delegate for your country, that is one of the breakthroughs, especially when you're talking about inclusivity at the highest level of decision making. We have several of those cases that I'm sure you have met personally. But then there are those that are in the small pockets really championing great things, particularly in relation to the SDGs. Earlier, I was talking about these women groups, finance groups, that are changing the way people think of SDGs, that it's not just a global phenomena, it's something that is closer to home. When you talk about poverty, it has a women and a youthful face, right? Because those are the challenges that women face. When you talk about unemployment, it has a youthful and a woman face. So you bring those issues closer to people so that they don't just think it's a UN problem.
Right, it's distant.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Nadir, if you let me chip in right here, I mean, when you asked if young people are leading, and when I said yes, I just don't want to give this false picture that everything is okay and that young people are here. No, I just like to look at things in a positive perspective. So I see young people innovating, and I think they're leading. But while you were talking, I was trying to look at the bigger picture, and then I realized every single initiative that I was talking about was actually founded by young people. These opportunities were, with tireless effort, crammed and founded by young people. These are not opportunities that were given on a golden plate to young people, right? So the need is still there. I mean, these are very constructive, informal ways of engaging young people participate in these conversations, but we are still lacking the formal methods of participation of young people in our societies. I just wanted to pitch that.
No, I think that's exactly right, and I love the idea that we're thinking here about this in real time. So how do we create those institutional methods, or the formal protocols, so to speak, even though being young is about not having protocols these days?
And you know, the conversation we just had, I am a little anti-protocol because I think it creates distance between the leaders and the public. So if, you know, I choose not to go by Honorable Kenwendo, because if you call me Boholo, then you think we can be friends, right?
Absolutely.
And you can talk to me about issues. But I think one of the most important things is for our young people to understand the infrastructures that exist, to understand, for example, how the parliament can work for them, that the parliament is not just for members of parliament, it's actually to represent their views. So the question would be, how do you contribute directly to the parliament? And what I have been trying to do is to inform as many young people as I can that there are about 4 ways that they can interact with government and with parliament more actively, and be in a position to hold us accountable should we not carry out what we had promised to do.
Wait, there are 4 ways? we all want to know what they are.
Oh.
Don't we?
No,
That was very specific.
Yeah, four ways. I mean, for Botswana's parliament, if you want to interact with parliament, there's a question, the parliamentary question time, there's a minister's question time, there's a private member's bill, and there are motions.
So it's institutionalized, it's formal,
yes,
and it's open and transparent.
Yes, and it's open and transparent. But the issue is that people don't know.
Yeah.
So you have all these questions that you keep to yourselves or you vent on social media, but you don't know that you can actually have your questions formally asked on your behalf by your member of parliament, so that you get a response from a cabinet minister that could maybe open up another dialogue. Yeah.
But Jayathma, you're now in a position where you have a platform that's dramatic, and you're touching people who you're their real connection to the United Nations. And so I wonder what you think about this kind of outreach. How do we actually get them excited about it? And beyond even excited, just get them in the know. Because as we've heard so many times, the SDGs are not necessarily known outside of our kind of community.
Definitely. I mean, there are two ways I see that we can do this. So when I say we, I say the United Nations and also the member states. The first way is, as Voko very correctly said, to engage young people in the real-time policy making. How we get young people in parliaments. How do we get them as direct policy makers? But in instances where this is hindered by different socio-economic or institutional barriers, in most cases, there are different ways of engaging young people through consultations, through youth-led mechanisms, youth councils, youth delegate programs, as Voko very correctly mentioned. So there are different mechanisms that have worked in different parts of the world that we can learn from, and there are also new ways that we would like to look at. For an example, my office is working very strongly on working out a new communication strategy, and we're actually testing some of it during this GA.